like we've talked a bit about trying to raise awareness, creating these petitions, lobbying. What is the next step? Like if you wanted to, if you set yourself the goal of, I want to put somebody with progressive ideas into number 10, how would you do that?
Um, well, so the first thing I think is to address that a lot of people feel like there's no one out there with that future vision,
Mm,
and I think that's a fair critique. In politics itself, there are very few people that actually say, here's an incredible kind of like vision for the future of everybody in the country,
yeah.
right? Um, that is fair. However, I think when you look outside of politics, there are tens of thousands of people that have those visions, whether it be for their local communities, or globally, right? And not only a vision, because having a vision is easy, but also, a plan, right? And actual, implementable ideas that are being implemented, in different places or at different scales. So there are people out there that have that vision and the capability and are probably more honest, right? And more qualified and more representative as well. They're not just the Etonian, middle-aged white men that, we become used to in government. So there are those people out there. I think so. That's the first thing, is that it's like, okay, if they're not currently standing as an MP, fine, I get it. A lot of them are uninspiring,
Mm,
but we need to go and find other people and kind of just say, look, take the next step, right? Stand for something, and we'll elect you, right? So that's the first thing. And I think those people are out there. And movement building is important for finding those people.
yeah.
Um, I think the longer question really is that, well, the longer answer, sorry, is that, of course, the current setup is not necessarily designed to allow those people to come from nowhere and be elected. At the moment, you have to go through one of the major parties. You have to go through their processes and systems and their politics to then be selected. And then maybe you might win, right? But then that comes with all sorts of other issues as well. If you're trying to stand as an independent, of course, there's lots of things stacked against you, because we see politics in this country, especially, as just a kind of, one party versus the other party, the footballification of it, and no one else really gets a look in. And even like, the Green Party, which is a small party, gets a lot of votes,
Mm-hmm.
comparable to the SNP. I think SNP have about 30% more, which is, not a huge amount when you're talking a million or 1.2 million votes or whatever it is. And they get one seat,
Yeah.
right? So even the smaller parties, are not going to get the representation, even though people do want them there. So the system obviously has to change, and obviously that's some form of proportional representation. I think there's so many of us that know that's the problem, right? And we know that that's the answer, and we all kind of like, we know that that's what we'll support. But the trick then is, well, how do you get it? Right? How
Mm,
do you get PR? And so the question we have at the moment is like, well, who's gonna give us PR? Whose interest is it in?
yeah.
It certainly isn't the current government. They're doing very well with a minority of the vote, right? So then we have to try and convince the other parties to not only do it, well, say they'll do it, but to then do it, but to somehow win the next election based on it as well, potentially. So that's a tricky one.
Is there not a risk, though, that if you tried to implement proportional representation in the UK, that the media would just fucking shoot it down? They would be like, this is radical. This is, they're trying to fix the game. They're trying to stack the deck in their own favor. And to an extent, we are, right? But there are other countries that operate in this way, right?
Yeah, plenty. There's only us and Belarus in Europe that don't,
Yeah.
right? And that should tell you something. I think the media have a bias to the status quo. It's not necessarily that they have a bias against good ideas, but anything that is kind of like challenging or different, is a bit weird and a bit out there. And it's like, oh, I don't know if this is a good idea.
Mm.
The irony there, of course, is that our current government is doing incredibly radical things every day, and we just kind of accept it. And like, one of the most frustrating things a campaigner can ever be told is that you can't change the world when you're seeing it being changed around you all the time.
Yeah.
So I think we just need to basically, not ignore the media entirely, but to call them out on that a little bit.
So that's easier said than done, though, isn't it? Because it's like, like I've never been more acutely aware than in the last 2 weeks of how much power the British newspapers have in terms of contorting, reframing, distorting messaging, and putting it into a place where, I'd like to think I'm reasonably media savvy and I can kind of, just roll my eyes at the headlines when I see them. But for every other, Tom, Dick, and Harry on the street who's not a news junkie who doesn't obsess